Good evening. I'm Shivali Srivastava, reporting for UTS Business and Law. Today, we are analyzing one of the most significant corporate restructures in the Australia's retail landscape, which is Myer and Premier merger. This isn't just a retail transaction; it's a legal case study in how control, governance, shareholders' rights, and court-supervised mergers play out in Australian corporate law. With my colleague Ajinkya, we'll take you through the structure of the deal, the legal processes involved, and the broader implications for corporate governance and regulatory compliance. In January 2025, Maya acquired premier investments apparel brands such as Just Jeans, JJ's, Portman's, Dottie's, and Jackie E in a deal valued at 864 million. Of this, 82 million AUD was paid in cash, while the remainder was settled through the issuance of 890 million new Myer shares, giving Premier a 51.5% controlling stake in Myer. But what makes this transaction particularly notable isn't just the commercial outcome, it is the legal structure that enabled it. The deal was executed via a scheme of arrangements under Part 5.1 of the Corporations Act 2001. This is a legal mechanism that allows company to restructure the shareholdings or control with the court supervision and shareholders' approval. To proceed, the scheme had to satisfy four legal thresholds: a double majority vote under Section 411 4A, an explanatory statement to the shareholders under Section 412, ASIC's review under Section 411, Subclause 17, confirming no objection, and two court hearings held in the Federal Court of Australia to review and approve the fairness and legality of the scheme. These legal steps ensure that the scheme of arrangement is far more than a business agreement. It is a court supervised process designed to uphold transparency and fairness and shareholders' protection. The key figures in this transaction are Olivier Rith, executive chair of Myer, and Solomon Liu, chairman of Premier Investments. While Myer is the acquiring party, it is Premier that gains effective control. Through the share issuance, Premier became the majority shareholder and Solomon Liu secured a direct seat on the board. This shift in the control, particularly with Liu, positioned both sides of the transaction. It raises an important corporate governance concern under Part 2D1 of the Corporations Act 2001. The Section 180, 181, and 182 of Corporations Act, which is regarding the director's duty, are critical in the post-merger integration phase when decisions about operations, employment, and strategy could disproportionately benefit the controlling shareholders. Directors must ensure their actions align with the interest of all the shareholders, not just Premier and its affiliates. From a regulatory standpoint, the Myer and Premier merger had to clear two major legal thresholds: competition clearance and takeover compliance. First, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, under Section 50 of Competition and Consumer Act 2010, assessed whether the merger would sustainably lessen the competition in the market. Given the highly fragmented nature of Australian retail sector, the ACCC determined that the transaction did not pose any significant threat to the competition. Second, Takeovers Panel empowered under Section 657A of Corporations Act 2001 reviewed whether the structure gave rise to unacceptable circumstances. That's because the deal was implemented via a scheme of arrangement which provides a recognized 20% exception of the takeover threshold under Item 17 of Section 661 of the Corporations Act. For that exemption, apply three key conditions that must be met. The scheme must be approved by the court, shareholders must be given adequate disclosure, and ASIC must either or not object, or the court must be satisfied under Section 411, Subclause 17. In this case, ASIC reviewed the scheme and raised no objection, allowing the Federal Court of Australia to approve the arrangement in full. This paved way for the transaction's lawful completion, all within the parameters of Australian corporate and competition law. Now, I would like to take you through the timeline of the transaction. 29th October 2024, Myer announces the share sale and implementation agreement, setting the structure of the deal. The 17th December 2024, where the explanatory memorandum is released to the shareholders, including key disclosures and the independent experts report. 15 January 2025, a supplementary report is issued with updated financial data to assist shareholders in the decision making. 22nd January 2025, both Myer and Premier shareholders vote overwhelmingly in the favor of the scheme. On 26th January 2025, the Federal Court of Australia grants final approval of the scheme of arrangements. On 28th Jan 2025, the transaction is finally completed and Premier becomes Myer's majority shareholders. April 2025 onwards, the integration process begins across branding, store networks, HR systems, and internal operations. Now that we have covered the structure, key players, and the regulatory pathway of Myer and Premier merger, I'll hand over to Ajinkya to walk us through what makes the transaction not just significant but legally unusual and strategically complex.
Well, thank you, Shivali. Several aspects make this merger stand out both strategically and legally. First, although Myer acquired Premier's apparel brands, it was Premier, the seller, that gained control. By receiving 890.1 million Myer shares, Premier secured a 51.5% equity stake, making this deal an effective reverse takeover, a structure rarely seen in Australia's retail sector. Second, Solomon Lee's dual role as Premier Chairman and now a Myer board member gives him both direct and indirect influence over Myer's strategic direction. This overlap raises serious governance concerns and places his conduct under close scrutiny against director duties under sections 180 to 182 in the Corporations Act. Third, the role of the courts in safeguarding fairness was central. As established in Re Amcom Telecommunications 2015, the second court hearing in a scheme of arrangement is not just procedural, it is a critical checkpoint to ensure that the scheme is fair and reasonable, especially for minority shareholders who risk being disenfranchised post merger. These legal protections are grounded in the Egglestone principles embedded in Section 602 of the Corporations Act, which uphold equal opportunity for shareholders to participate in control transactions, comprehensive and timely disclosure, transparent and informed decision making. In this case, the Meyer Premier merger wasn't simply a commercial agreement. It was a real time test of Australia's corporate fairness framework, executed under full judicial and regulatory scrutiny. Following the announcement of the deal, Meyer's share price rose by 2.8%, while Premier's rose by 5.4%. This immediate uplift suggests a positive market reception. But from a legal standpoint, the more important question is whether Meyer met its disclosure obligations. Under Australian Security Exchange Listing Rule 3.1 and Section 674 of the Corporations Act 2001, listed entities must immediately disclose any information that could materially affect their share price. Meyer complied these obligations by announcing the transaction by 29th October, releasing the explanatory memorandum on 17th December, publishing a supplementary independent experts report on 15th January 2025, and confirming completion of the deal on 28th January 2025. Had Meyer failed to meet these obligations, ASIC could have intervened under Section 1041H for misleading or deceptive conduct or Section 1317HA to impose civil penalties. Disclosure like this is vital to prevent a false market where investors trade based on incomplete or unequal access to information, something ASIC closely monitors. This obligation has also been enforced in prior cases, including ASIC versus Fortescue Metal Groups Limited, where inadequate disclosure led to significant reputational and legal consequences. In this case, the scheme booklet and regular Australian Security Exchange announcements were not just corporate formalities. They were critical legal compliance tools, ensuring the market remained transparent, informed, and fair. Is the deal complete? Yes, the scheme became effective on 26 January 2025 and full operational integrity began shortly after. But from a legal and governance perspective, this post deal phase is just as critical as the scheme itself. Under Australian corporate law, directors remain bound by their core duties under Part 2D.1 of the Corporations Act, including Section 180 to act with care and diligence, Section 181 to act in good faith and in the best interest of the company, as well as Section 182, which is not to misuse their position for personal or related party gain. These obligations become especially important during the integration process when decisions are being made around store closures, workforce restructuring, IT systems, and brand alignment. The risk of conflict increases when a controlling shareholder is also directly represented on the board, as is the case here with the Premier holding 51.5% and Solomon Liu occupying a board seat. Directors must ensure that their decisions reflect the interest of all shareholders, including minorities, not just the preference of the dominant party. As affirmed in Re Simons Group Limited, say 2016, courts will not hesitate to intervene where a scheme or its implementation results in oppressive or commercially unreasonable outcomes. So, while the court may have approved the deal, the legal accountability of directors continues, and integration must be handled with ongoing diligence and fairness. The Myer Premier merger is a compelling example of how Australian corporate law enables strategic transformation while enforcing critical legal safeguards. In this case, a scheme of arrangement allowed Premier to acquire a 51.5% controlling stake in Myer without triggering a formal takeover bid. That was only possible through strict compliance with Section 411, which is shareholder voting thresholds and court approval, ASIC's oversight under Section 411 subsection 17, and review by the Federal Court of Australia. The structure may offer flexibility, but it's far from informal. The process was closely supervised at every stage, from shareholder fairness and class treatment to disclosure and independent expert review. And critically, the law's role doesn't end with court approval. With integration now underway, Myers directors remain bound by their duties under sections 180 to 182 to act diligently, in good faith, and without misuse of position. As Premier's influence increases, directors must ensure that decisions, whether involving branding, staffing, or systems integration, serve all shareholders, not just the majority. If that balance shifts, Section 232 offers a legal remedy empowering courts to act in cases of operation or unfair prejudice. Ultimately, this merger illustrates how corporate law doesn't just permit control to shift, it ensures that such power is exercised with fairness, transparency, and legal accountability at its core. In the end, the Meyer Premium Merger isn't just a headline, it's a case study in how control changes hands within the rule of law. In mergers and acquisition, deals are often driven by strategy but shaped by regulation, guided by structure, and sealed by the courts. This was more than a merger. It was a demonstration of how Australian law navigates power, protects stakeholders, and legitimizes transformation. Because in mergers and acquisition, the deal may be financial, but the trust comes from the law. Thank you for watching.